podcast world. So I'll say good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Thanks so much for joining us on the regular to the Sportsline Podcast. And if you are a first timer, we hope to hook you for good. Hey, our general focus, as always, is sports from an athlete, coach, official, executive, and of course, a golden horseshoe perspective. And of course, my favorite would be a broadcasting perspective. And today, we take that route with someone very special to so many in this region. From his humble days and first taste of television and radio in Sault Ste. Marie, this Mississauga native was destined for more. With an offer of making $35 a sportscast, Paul Hendrick soon became one of the most trusted sportscasters at CHCH in the 1980s. His appreciation for sports on a local level was showcased on the CHCH staple OUA Game of the Week, where dreams came true for so many university-level athletes. After leaving to host the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey games, a relatively new specialty station by the name of Leafs TV stepped forward, and the man known to most as Henny wowed us with his knowledge, smile, and master of the English language. Paul Hendrick, you're here at CHCH, and it's a good feeling for me because I'll tell you this right off the top. My love for sports broadcasting had a lot to do and what you and your pack in that 1980s did at CHCH, and it's great to be sitting here with you years later.
Thanks so much, Bubba. You know, I think back to my first broadcast, December 5th, 1981, working alongside a legend in Norm Marshall, just as nervous as I can be, getting through that 30 minutes at 6 o'clock that evening. 30 seconds later, a call into the control room from Dan McLean saying, "Welcome to the family." It's a part of the family. I've never left, and getting a chance to come back to the new digs here and seeing this younger generation, they just felt like nephews and nieces, and in some cases maybe grandchildren, right? But we were all family. We're all part of the CHCH family. So thanks for having me back, and thanks for that great info. That just does wonders for my heart. Well,
it's an important part of our area, and you are well remembered. I go few places where your name is not brought up, and the many people that you worked with. But I got to ask you, what are you up to now? What's going on?
Retired and traveling a lot with my wife, and you know, we've spent a lot of time in Spain, especially the last 3 years, most of our winters. I'm a big Real Madrid fan. I'm a big history fan, culture and art. Didn't get to see a lot of Toronto Maple Leaf hockey and other things, right? But that's okay. Heading off in a different direction. But I do love Real Madrid football, and I get to quite a few games. It's expensive, but it's so much fun. But just spending more time with my wife. But I'll be honest, I'm getting a little itchy. I could use a project or two, and would always be open to getting back into the business because my brain's still relatively sharp and I feel good.
Well, I'll tell you, and I'm glad you clarified this about this European vacation stuff, because every time I see you on Facebook or pictures, I'm like, where is he? The French Riviera? And how come he keeps getting out to these places that I'm dreaming about? So I guess semi-retirement's treating you well.
It is. And you know, my wife got sick 2015, November 2015, you know, with cancer. 9 years later, she's still going strong. But I did realize that after her first recurrence 4 years later in 2019, that let's do some other things. And Alicia's worked so hard, educated, McMaster Medical School, both kids born here at Hamilton St. Joe's. This is our hometown. And let's just make good with the time we have, because for all of us, you just don't know. And we've made great use of that. And that's going to Madrid, where her mother is from, and staying there and getting to know the city, getting to know the country better. And I've been going there for 37 years. But the last few years of getting to stay put, not having to be rushed to do A, B, and C, we'll do that next week or we'll do that this week, has been a real lesson in education.
Well, I'm sure you were where you were in terms of, I mean, I know what it's like to just being in this business and the dedication in terms of hours that you have to commit if you want to be good and you want to do your job properly. But then you kind of stepped it up by being with the Leafs and following them on the road. And boy, that's, I mean, I try to tell people, because I had little stints with it at Sportsnet where I was with the Leafs on the road, and I know you and I connected several times up in the media booth, and it's a wonderful thing because you get to see different cities and the Leafs playing, and it's a special thing. But boy, it's a grind.
It's a grind. And I knew at that point in 2020, I had the opportunity to come back for another year. I just wanted to finish the half year into COVID and then get out. And they just, that's not going to work for us. Are you good to go now? And I said, yes, I am. Mm-hmm. But it was a great grind. Mm-hmm. But the research involved, oh my God! I remember I did a morning stint with Don Landry at the Fan. I was co-hosting with him. We had a game against the Flyers the night before, and we had Dr. Andrews on, phenomenal orthopedic surgeon, and I had so much work, and Don just looked at me and just said, keep asking the questions. I didn't get home until midnight that night, and I was up at 4 a.m. the next morning and in there for 5:15, and just the preparation. But it's so grateful and tremendously felt that when you leave these things and you've done your homework, that you haven't left anything on the table. You got to be prepared. And what an opportunity for us. You've always been a people person. For me, it's why I got into the job. In our condominium, I can go up an elevator, not know who they are, but I'll start asking questions. I'm just very inquisitive about it. We all have stories to tell, and it could be you were the best football player at Nelson back in the day, or not even the best football player,
please.
Or Assumption. And I think a Lee Knight, and him coming out of Burlington High School football and playing junior ball, and then going to the Tiger Cats, and being a professional football player. We all have stories to tell. I think they're really interesting.
Tell me a story about your transition, because your first job in television is doing radio and television in Sault Ste. Marie. Yeah. How did you get to Hamilton?
So I did news for a year in the Sioux. Then I got into sports, which is what I wanted to do. Terry Crisp, coach of the Greyhounds, all of that. Summer of '81, I was coming down for a friend's wedding in Belleville, and I put in tapes in Windsor, CHCH, City TV, Checks in Peterborough, CJOH. Late Brian Smith interviewed me, and just trolling, just hoping to see if something would come up. Well, a few months later, early November, 12:30 at night, I get a call from Dick Beddoes. And I thought it was a prank. I thought it was a prank from one of my colleagues. And I'm not going to say what I said to this guy, like, knock it off in more or less terms. And Dick goes, do you want the job or not? And I said, it's you. And then I remember when I got to work at CHCH, Dick would do the 11. He would be in his office just doing stuff. He wouldn't head home to Etobicoke until well after 1 a.m. He was just hanging around like a studio rat. And I said, I'm coming. It was $35 a newscast. I would do Saturday, Sunday, 6 and 11, and we had a 12:35 noon a newscast on Sundays. So, and Wednesdays when Dick worked for our CHCH game, he was in between intermission guest and analyst. So I had 5. That was 6 newscasts a week, 6 times 35, $210 a week. But he knew I could live at home in Mississauga and Lorne Park. So I took it, and what an opportunity it was. 17 years at Channel 11, worked with the greatest of people, and we're family members for life, and that includes you.
It's amazing to think of those humble beginnings, and you meet so many people, and in the job that we work, it's so impossible not to bond with particular people. And, I can think about, the names of the past that I certainly looked at when I was watching television at a young age. But I'll tell you, one of the things, as much as I loved what you did at CHCH as a sportscaster, myself playing high school football and watching the OUA game of the week, and I know to this day, I am walking around the community and people are begging us. Costs, we've been able to do a couple of things. I think we did the Yates Cup for about 4 or 5 years. We've done some OG, HL hockey. But the OUA game of the week was as I said earlier, that was a staple of this station.
I was just going to say it was a staple, a cornerstone. And I don't know whether it was part of the CRTC mandate when CHCH was given its license and had to continue to repeat that they needed so much Canadian content. Well, in 1954, I think, when the station came on board, of course, 70th anniversary coming up, they started doing games, and Norm Marshall called those games. And we're talking cameras that weighed 3 tons each, not the stuff we have now, and the crew's having to set that up. And at most, a 3-camera shoot, wide, tight, and an end zone camera. And that was pretty much what we had, although we had a few handhelds as well. But it was a staple. And even to this day, I will run into people who have graduated from the OUA ranks. And John Graffey, this is just a few years ago at a party up in Collingwood. Henny, how are you? And John, how are you? Tell my wife how great I was. Is John's second wife, and she just started rolling her eyes. He was really good. He was part of a Laurier team that was able to beat Western in Western. That wasn't easy to do. So I loved running into all those people. But that was like our NFL, and it was always important to mention where these kids went to high school. And if you knew them, we knew who their coaches were. Who the teachers were that enabled this great athlete to go to this institution and to get a chance to play Saturday. I think that was part of our folklore, was telling where these athletes came from, and they were from all over Ontario. You mentioned a high school. I can probably come up with a name or two that went from that high school on to play OUA Sports. Now it was OUAA back then.
Oh, yeah, so you're right, OUAA. And I pulled up a couple of those broadcasts, to prepare for you and I speaking. Yeah. And there was one done at Western, Andy Fantus, my broadcast partner at Ticats TV. And just looking at it and the way so professionally done. Yeah. And I think that's why it stood out, that game of the week, because it stood up to anything at the time.
Yes.
And the effort and the people that were working in the truck, the preparation that I know you put together, the call, that whether it was you doing it or Norm Marshall doing it, like what a presentation it was.
Yeah, and it's just a product of passion. We loved it. And Saturdays, Friday nights was always game prep at home. Inevitably, I'd have been on a campus that week doing an interview with an athlete that would run as our halftime profile. That was the best part, going over to London, going over to Laurier, Guelph, getting to mic a coach, getting to talk to these athletes who love the attention. And why wouldn't they love the attention, right? We were putting them on the front of the marquee. It was tremendous. And some of the great games, especially basketball at the House of Slam up in Guelph, when Western was great, Guelph was great, Mac always great, and Brock, under Ken Murray.
Ken.
Some of those games were, and then inevitably it got so big they had to move them inside Copps Coliseum because they were getting 7,000, 8,000 fans for these games. I think television had a great deal to do with it, and I feel proud that we had a great deal to do with the passion we brought to it. And I think, Dave Wilson, one of our early directors, and then Phil LaChapelle as well, continuing the trend of university sport. And the university's giving us carte blanche with what we wanted to do. They love the publicity, and I miss that the games are not on CHCH anymore.
Yeah, it really was tremendous. And you just listed off Ken Murray. I think of like Joe Razzo. Like these guys were like as big as NBA. Like that's how big it was. And really, when I think about it, really where we've come so far with the growth of basketball right now, because of individuals like that. It's because now we're producing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's a possible NBA MVP right out of Steeltown
Top 5
right now.
Players on the entire planet.
Exactly, it's crazy. You know what I mean? Like all and Hamilton and the love for its sports, but like it all whizzes, there's end game. And one day.
Yep.
You leave for the Maple Leafs. What happened?
I got an opportunity. I remember it was Tiger Woods' first Canadian Open, and I was at Glen Abbey covering that for our station here. And Ron Harrison Sr. called me up. And my heart starts leaping. And he said, how committed to Hamilton and CHCH are you? And I said, I'm only committed to my family. Why do you ask, Ron? He said, well, we'd like to offer you the hosting job midweek. And I said, I'll take it. He said, I haven't even offered you a salary. I said, throw out a number. He threw out a number. I said, I'll take it. He said, oh, my God.
Shouldn't there be some bargaining here?
He could have said free, and I would have gone. And it wasn't a reflection of leaving Channel 11. It was an opportunity to host Maple Leaf hockey. And so I went in the next day to their offices and signed the contract. And I remember telling my wife that if I've got this job in December, I'm going to feel grateful, because you never say no to a challenge, and you've got to push yourself. But was I truly confident? No, it was a whole different level. I was comfortable at Channel 11. You've been there for 17 years, but it was a good time to go. And that to me was just an amazing moment. And then the nervousness of having to tell Phil LaChapelle, it was like breaking up a marriage or leaving a girlfriend, vice versa. He and I were so connected. And our last football game was at York University, Waterloo in York. We'd done our broadcast, and that day his wife called my wife and just say, Phil's just so depressed, and Alicia's going, so is Paul. But we both ended up going Phil to CBC, me to Molson Sports and Entertainment to do Leaf Hockey, and those are some of the tough decisions, but necessary decisions, and what an adventure the Leafs were beyond that.
Well, you said the word comfort, and I think once we do get comfortable, that's an indication that, you know what, maybe it's time for a new challenge. And I tell people this all the time because I've actually had the luxury of doing both. And there's a wonderment to working in the studio and working with your colleagues, and it's so much fun, and you grind together to put together that newscast and that sportscast, and you argue and you bicker, and I want more time, I need less time, more weather needs more time. Like,
nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. No. That still goes on right now. But then there's something about covering live events. Yeah. It's a high that you just can't beat.
I used to write a 2-minute opening. Mark Askin, our producer, would give me the shot list. And from that shot list, 7 seconds of this player, 6.5 of this coach, crowd noise for this, I would put together, it was a poem that would set us up for that game. But try doing that 52 to 53 times a year and coming up with different stuff. It was not easy.
But you always did it.
Always did. And I remember John Shannon took over at Leafs TV and said, we're not doing that anymore, and I was kind of relieved, but it was a great run. But not only that, being prepared for that open where you're 3.5 minutes live, either on the ice, up in the stands, or between the benches, 30 seconds. Have a good show, everybody. And I mean, just trying to keep the heart suppressed, trying to keep my thoughts, reminding myself, enjoy this, because let's be honest, you're nervous. You've been prepping for this for the last 18 hours, going through it, and as soon as the open's done, and if it's done well, you're so relieved because the interview parts and all the rest of the game was so easy. But that opening, especially, I remember we were in Long Island. It was the first game back after Darcy Tucker had taken out Mike Pekka's knee in that playoff series, and the crowd, you talk about violent and loud, and walking across the parking lot from the Marriott in Long Island to the Nassau County Coliseum, and they knew who we were, and oh my God, it was as if I took Pekka's knee out, and just, you get psyched up for that, but you also realize you've got about 1 million people watching, but you're just connected to the guys in the truck. Mark Askin, and Mark's in my ear the entire time, and just keeping me settled, and all of that. But it's the teamwork you talked about around here. I want more time. I need this. It's teamwork, and that for me is what I'm always going to remember. Whether it was here at Channel 11 or working with our Leaf crew, the group that come together over a period of time, and then you get older, and all of a sudden is, where the hell did that time all go? And it's a whole new group of people coming in and doing the same thing and sharing those same emotions, and I salute them now. I do miss a lot of it, but I'm also happy with where my life's at now, and able to move forward and into a new chapter.
You work with a guy by the name of Joe Bowen. Can you tell our listeners and viewers what Joe Bowen is like? I mean, how many years he's been calling games? Well, 40.
It's over 3,000 games. Yeah, 40. Joe, to be able, whether it be television, now more so on radio, because he can lift you out of your seat and make the hair on the back of your neck stand on end, and to capture the emotion of a game and to do it and ad lib. There are no catchphrases. Oh, if this happens, I'd better remember this. I remember coming back from co-hosting the Hamilton Telethon. I had a portion of it, a Children's Hospital Telethon, and Toronto was in Ottawa trying to stay alive, down 3-2, and they blocked every shot under the sun, and I remember his calling, God bless you boys, and I'm crossing the Bronte Bridge, and I'm going, what a call, and it just blew me away, and then of course, recently we're going to Boston, buddy, and we're going to get the job done.
Oh yeah.
Hey, that was every Leaf fan right on board, and Joe was able to pick them up in the palm of his hands. And Joe's 72 now, and as you get older, things don't get easy. We all have our ailments, but Joe still has the passion and the fire in his stomach and in his heart. He's just an outstanding broadcaster. There's a lot of talk, hey, Joe should be on TV, and I'd love to see him on television as well. You've got Chris Cuthbert there, who's not only a tremendous broadcaster, but a first ballot Hall of Fame person.
Absolutely.
And so I stay right out of that. They're both great at what they do. Not for different reasons, but in different ways. But Joe Bowen, to me, is the voice of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
No doubt.
And that's out of respect to all involved.
No doubt. But you know what, Henny, maybe you agree, maybe you don't agree. And I know there was a time where Joe was on television. And because of the nature of television and the commercial breaks and all the kinds of things, and, there's just so much going on. I thought I wasn't hearing the real Joe on television, but when it's on the radio and with the guy he's with,
yes,
I just feel radio was a better fit for him. Do you agree?
Yes, but I know in our midweek broadcast, he and Harry got to do an awful lot of what they wanted to do and stay. I remember one game, Curtis Joseph, I think we were in Carolina, and he is so acrobatic and athletic, and I'm on the sideline just looking at that. And Henny, what do you see? And I said, Jesus, Mary, and Curtis Joseph, that was incredible. And Joe goes, you can't say that. I said, I just did, and I meant it. We got to do quite a bit of what we wanted to do. It is a little more formatted, I know. I agree. And, Joe wasn't moved over to TV when the opportunity was there, and they were saying, well, no, because TV is not for him. But all the other markets, their radio guys were doing TV.
That's a good point. Yep.
So, I don't know about the politicking involved. I guess that'd be a whole show in itself. But it was difficult when Joe wasn't included in that move over. But that's life in our business.
Yeah, well, he's still working, right? And that's the best part, Hey, and I think that's one thing to really recognize is the fact that you had the opportunity, and we talk about brands. I don't know, is there a bigger, maybe even better, you tell me, brand to work with when it comes to the National Hockey League than the Toronto Maple Leafs?
The NHL, worldwide brand, Real Madrid soccer. I've always said, my daughter was in Madrid visiting us this past winter. We were at a game down low, right off the bench, and I said, 82,000 fans here, not one of them care about the Maple Leafs game tonight. But no, Maple Leafs, absolute huge brand, no matter where we go. And I recall a trip walking through the airport in Johannesburg, South Africa, and hearing Henny. And I turn around, guy with hair to here, he's Australian, never been to Canada, never seen a Leaf game ever in person, but he was a huge Toronto Maple Leaf fan, and he followed the team and all its broadcasters and whatnot. He knew exactly who I was, and the same usual questions, when are we going to win a Stanley Cup? But this was a guy from Australia in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I think that just said it all.
That blows me away. Yeah. And I think it would be fair to say that even though you are now in, semi-retirement, that, you are still following the team somewhat, maybe not as tightly, obviously, as you once did. But I think there would probably still be a connection for you. I am not a Leaf fan. I am a Leaf follower. I do so because it's part of my business. It's a part of the area that we live in. But I do have a certain amount of feeling for Leaf fans, for what they go through, the dedication that they've put in. And, you and I had a chat about 2020 on CHCH, and this was a team with the likes of an Austin Matthews and a Mitch Marner, the beginnings of the core four. And I just want our director, Mike, to roll this clip, please.
But this was a big, big year as far as going through the ups and downs and the expectations, and yet there they were in a playoff position. So all in all, I think a good learning year for this hockey club. It's only going to get better. The elite talent is so elite. They've got to add a few pieces here, especially defensively, but I don't think they're that far away moving forward.
They're not that far away going forward. Henny, we're still waiting.
I know we are. And I was 10 when they last won the Cup. And the pressure, it's like driving up the Jolly Cut here in Hamilton, and you see those different sedimentary layers that were all underwater at one point in time. That's the legacy of this current Leaf group, having to carry all those layers.
I can't believe you just compared the Leafs to the escarpment. That's wonderful.
It just is, and they can only be responsible for what they're responsible for. This is as talented a group, Bubba, as I've been a part of, and maybe even more so than some of the earlier 90s groups, but in early 2000s under Pat Quinn and Pat Burns prior to that. But they're not as much of a team, I don't think. Those other four lines, say, 92, 93, 94, well, 93, 94, you had a lot more balance. And so now everything is top heavy in terms of the core five. Morgan Riley, who's under a great deal as far as the team is concerned. But where do they go now with this current group? Because obviously it's not happening. My only concern is if you bail too early, and you can't blow it up, because then you'll never get as close as you are now. And I know how close are we. We haven't gotten past a first round except for once in the last 8 years. But I look at Steve Yzerman, and they wanted him run out of town. Scotty Bowman talked to him and said, we don't care if you score 49 goals a year. We need you to play both ends of the ice. And, things change and great management decisions. They won 3 Stanley Cups. They don't win them if they trade Steve, and the Capitals don't win a cup if they trade Alex Ovechkin. And they wanted him out of town because they, just thought he wasn't working hard enough. He's just a goal-scoring machine. So I don't know. I'm perplexed with this group as to what you do and what you can do. John Tavares is going to be gone in a year, I think, unless there's a hometown discount. But Mitch is coming up as of July 1. They can extend him. Do they extend him, or do you get him to agree to waive his no-movement clause, maybe bring a package in that would have to include a good goaltender, a gritty right-handed shot defenseman, and a really decent forward second, third line. I'm not talking fourth line. I don't know if you're going to get that. I just don't know if you're going to be able to replace what a 100-point or 90-point guy's going to do. But, you argue, what has Mitch done in the postseason? And it's a good argument. I think following that ankle sprain, he was not the same player that we saw, and we talked about it on the phone the other day. He was turned into north-south. He wasn't east-west north. He wasn't an all-compass player. I think that really had an effect on him. I'm not the general manager of the club. I would hate to see him go because I just don't think we're going to be able to replace him. But maybe this team needs something like this, much like which happened with the bringing in of Kawhi Leonard.
It's the biggest example of all time.
I think it is.
Sport.
Exactly.
Right?
And they won a championship.
But boom, like a team that had been knocking on the door with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. Such great teams that kept running into LeBron, or Washington would upset them.
Yeah.
And it was not just a couple of years. It was a number of years. Frustrated Raptor fans because you knew how good they were. Setting records with wins. And yes, you're right. The one move was made. And the crazy thing was Kawhi only played like 65 games that year, but it was enough. Even when load management got introduced, they were still winning those games that he wasn't there. Maybe the culture was a different culture.
Yeah.
But let me ask you about Mitch, because you're right. He's a special athlete. I've seen this guy from London. I know you have as well too. There's not much. This guy could take a puck out of a phone booth. This guy is something else. But there's a disconnect. Help me. This is my observation. Unfortunately, he maybe under the nervous or the lights, and I can't believe he'd be nervous, but he made the comment about the Leafs are like gods, like God, people were upset about that. I do think from a personal standpoint of being in those scrums at times and hearing them refer to the reporters as you guys, What's up there?
I don't know. And there's enough media management by Steve Keogh and his team at MLSE who are fantastic. Manage the message. Sometimes I think it's too managed. I don't think Mitch meant to say it the way he meant to say it. I think, we're placed on pedestals would have been a more appropriate thing. But, we say things in the moment in a bank of cameras, and there's so much frustration knowing he wished he could have done better, didn't do better, and it's the same epilogue for another year. Fans let down. That could all change next year. It might not, but it could all change next year. I don't know if he regrets having said it, but I know what he meant to say, and it wasn't gods. And the fact of the matter is, they are treated like gods. I'm telling you, having traveled with that club and going everywhere, and Mitch is such a good guy. I know my wife went through health problems, and my daughter Caroline is a good friend of Mitch's, going back to the days when she was at Western. He played for the Knights. She got a jersey. Mitch, on a Sunday after game, invited her over to his place. He signed it all, and it raised over $1,000 for ovarian cancer research. That's what I remember. Mitch is a hell of a person. He's an incredible player. And if he's allowed to stay here in Toronto and they're able to win a cup, he and Austin will be the next two inductees onto Legends Row. And I know we can get sort of centered in on the immediate and be really frustrated with him. But we had Larry Murphy. We had Jake Gardner, two outstanding players, two great people. Larry went on to win cups in Detroit. Jake did not. But both really good hockey players. It's just the nature of the beast in this market. Pick somebody out and jump all over him. And Mitch is the latest target.
Another target, maybe, and taking full responsibility. I thought was really neat to see the responsibility that he absorbed for his team. Was the head coach Sheldon Keefe?
Oh.
What in your opinion should his future be?
I'd like to see him stay on. I think the fact that he came on to Media Day and provided what he did when he did not have to come out may be an indication that he's not coming back, and this was his opportunity to say what he had to say. Got to travel with Sheldon a couple of years in the postseason, the most memorable being 2018 when the Marlies won the Calder. We're talking long bus trips to Albany, Hershey, and just what he did to manage that group and win a Calder Cup. He's always been a winner wherever he's been. He's a good hockey coach. He also, back-to-back 100-point seasons. I was there in Arizona when his wife, his mother-in-law lives in Arizona. How excited they were and how excited we were for him for the opportunity of replacing Mike Babcock. And you realize there's a shelf life to all of this. And I just think, I know the fan base are going to want changes. They're not necessarily going to want, they're going to want maybe Mitch traded, but he's got a no movement clause. And so that may not happen, but you can fire a coach, even though Sheldon's got 2 years left. He's a tremendous coach. He's a tremendous person. He's going to get hired really quickly, not long after I think the axe comes down. And unfortunately, I think it's going to come down here because of the pressure to make a move of some sort. And maybe it's time for a different message in the room, and that's just the nature of that beast.
Well, the old saying, you're hired to be fired, and
right.
and that goes for coaches at any level, a professional level in any sport. Henny, this has been great chatting with you. I don't want to take up your whole day, but I want to kind of finish up at least with this. I do something called picture time every once in a while. I'll just roll video or show pictures of someone, and then you just react. So let's just roll video number one.
Dan McLean called me 30 seconds after I did my first broadcast. Enough said. Total class act. I love this guy. He's up in Owen Sound right now, and he was the anchor. There's Dick Beddoes on the left, the man who hired me in November of 1981. We had our differences at times, but what a bright guy, what a cantankerous guy on air. He was truly entertainment, and when you talk old school, Dick, and Dan for that matter as well, just so smooth. He could sit down with a prime minister, a president, and there's Henny tweets back in the day, and hair sponsored by Alexandrian Carpet, right? You're talking, that was our new building, right? That's the old building, and it's now a big hole in the ground. It's going to be a condominium, but getting a chance to share, and here we are now all these years later. 41-year career, Bubba. I was on with you and Steve Foxcroft, and I guess Halton Cable, and it was such a great show because we were talking Burlington High School sports, and
we had you on our show. It was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Kind of how I feel now.
Yeah, same here. I haven't lost that passion. You still got it, and that's why you're still doing it, right? And you love your backyard, and so do I.
I do. Video number two.
Connie Smith, look at the hair on that day. I remember Dick Beddoes referring to her on air as his climactic cupcake Constance Smith, because Connie used to do the weather. And Connie out of Mohawk College, and we just celebrated her 70th birthday this past December, and Connie looks as good now as she did then. An anchor, a reporter, and what Connie brought to work, it was her heart, her passion. She just loved her job, and she's still doing it at times. And she drove this little green Triumph. I remember I had a little Renault Lacar secondhand car, and Connie comes in with her green Triumph. Just for me, as like a little movie star, because I'd seen her on air living in Mississauga, and I was getting a chance to work and share in a newsroom with Connie and Burlington Girl, and just a good person. Just a really good person.
And the fact that she, to this day, is out still doing community work, is still as well known in these parts as she was back in those days. Goes to show you her dedication to the community. I had her on here. She was, I think, maybe my third guest here. The numbers were massive. They really was. And it wasn't just sports people. People wanted to just know what Connie was up to.
She's a good person.
She really was.
And a testimony to her passion for the work.
Video number 3.
Please. Okay, I don't have my glasses on. Well, is this the 90s? Is this Vancouver, Toronto, 94 play? Oh, it's Bob McGill. Big Daddy. He's my best friend. I'll tell you right now, he's my best friend. We worked together for such a long time. I called him on his birthday just a week and a half ago, and he always ends it off with "Love you, brother." And I love him, Bubba. He had 2 strokes back to back in the summer of 2016, and called me at 6 a.m. from hospital, just saying, he couldn't talk. And yeah, I've had a stroke, and this guy battled back, and he was ready for training camp. He's got such a huge heart, and he has a record, Bubba, that will never be broken. He 263 penalty minutes as a 19-year-old in his rookie year with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Half the stuff he did, you would be suspended for minimum of 10 games. So that record will never be touched. I remember he was in a fight in a game in Chicago, and he had this big circle in between his eyes. His brother was there, but you're not telling the coach. He and his brother was down watching, and they went to TGIFs afterwards and had margaritas, and the black spot went away. The other thing was he fought his brother 3 times in junior hockey. I said, how could you fight your brother? And he said, well, I'm a right-handed shot, and he played left wing. No, I said, that's not what I meant. You were going into the same corners together. He fought his brother 3 times, and he was a middleweight. He's got such a huge heart. He's I talk about Connie being a good person. Big Daddy's that as well.
Oh man,
Yeah.
Let me leave you on this one here. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that and that's someone that you work with, and again, we put all the time on the air, and you said and sometimes we go our separate ways after we retire and move on, but to see that you guys are still close means a lot. I don't know. You have no idea how many times I'm up on Maple Leafs at on a Saturday or Wednesday night up at Maple Leafs Media Row and seeing you two going back and forth.
The old Muppets in the balcony.
Stella kind of pumping in a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of off to the side listening to you guys, and I'm like this is like a dream for me, listening to you guys hammer on each other. It is just go forward. Wow, that's special stuff. Let me leave you with this here. You've seen broadcasting in its heyday, CHCH in its ultimate heyday in the 80s and 90s. And I'm sure you're still in touch with the key people and see and watch the television. Where are we with sports broadcasting today?
Where am I in sports broadcasting?
Where are we in terms of as an industry?
It's a different deal. In terms of fan response, and all you have to do is go on social media. People hiding behind keyboard. I think there's not as much respect as there used to be, and call me old school for that, but you bring respect. I look at the young generation in this newsroom. I got a chance to meet them. Total respect. So I see a lot of hope in that regard. But it's the expectations. I don't want to use the word entitlement because I'm really sounding old. I know the Leafs haven't won a cup since 1967, but they're going to win a cup. It's going to be like Boston winning their first in baseball after all those years, and then a few followed after that. It's going to be incredible. And as big as the celebration was for the Raptors, the Leafs will easily double that, with all due respect to the Toronto Raptors and their fans. But it's just... I don't know. It's not as personal, I don't think. It's not as easy to cover the Maple Leafs as it used to be, where you can sit down beside a player, talk with them like a Tom Fitzgerald, an Alan McCauley, Travis Dermott, Luke Shen, Morgan Riley, and they trusting you, that they, that Marcus Foligno, I remember he's in Buffalo, in a visiting game, and Dan Bilesman was the coach, and he was just saying, we're always looking over our backs here because we're afraid to make a mistake. I didn't go to air with that, but him trusting us and myself that I was going to do the right thing, and just
to travel with them.
Just a person who wants to talk. This was a visiting team guy, but you get to see these guys a lot over the course of the career, and they learn to trust you. So I think it's the respect part of it, but I think it will come. It's such a volatile world these days politically. There's a polarization of everything. I just wish there was more common ground, because when you've got common ground, whether it be a little bit left or a little bit right, it's a more peaceful time rather than extreme this, extreme that. And if there's no middle, then you get civil war. So we got to keep the middle going. And as we get older, you gravitate more toward the middle, because the extremes don't mean as much to you as they once did when you were younger. So it's a long answer to a very short question. But I'd like to see more respect today in everything, not just sports.
Well, the old Aretha Franklin word respect is just a little minor piece of the respect that I have for you, and getting to see your career, be motivated by it. I brought this up with you. I'll just share it quickly with our listeners and viewers about me coming in on a career day. I couldn't tell if I was in grade 7 or 8, but I was in primary school, and knowing that I only wanted to do one of two things in my life, and that was be either an air traffic controlman or a sportscaster. And my parents would not have it that I would be an air traffic controlman, because at that time, prior to all the computers that we have, the job was a really high stress job, and they didn't want me going down that route. I love sports, so I chose sports. And I remember on this career day coming to the old CHCH building and going up those stairs and seeing you and Ken Welch and
Freddie
Anderton and all Boilio, the can you do it?
Tim Boilio,
we actually dropped a shot of
Jerry,
him
his dad,
like that too. And seeing you guys banging away on your typewriters, writing your scripts, and you guys had some visuals and all these tapes, and that was like boom, I'm in, and
you were locked.
I'm locked, and I ended up going to Mohawk, and I've had opportunities doing things in sports television that I never dreamed or dreamt that I could ever accomplish or be. But you are a major part of that, as I talked to you about earlier in the OUA game of the week. So to have you here and talk shop and about the days, and as I said, the glory days of this station as well, too, a real treat for me. I hope it was, and in fact, I'm confirming that it was a treat for the people that listen and watch this podcast. Thank you, Paul, for coming in.
Thank you. And a future generation will leap off your shoulders and take CHCH into the next generation, Bubba. And if I can feel a part of having inspired you along with the rest of us, then that makes me feel great, because you've inspired others as well.
Hope to come back.
Will do.
Pleasure. Folks, that's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports. And if you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline podcast, want to hear from you, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you have something to say, please do. We like your comments. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.